Hello, everyone, and welcome to What's Next. It's the Indy NXT Road Series taking on WATKINS GLEN International in its classic boot configuration. Joining me, as always, is Sophie Connell up here in the booth, fresh off a solid finish in the INDYCAR Open Series here tonight from Mexico City. We're looking for a nice classic American road course here, making its debut here in the Indy NXT Road Series. Looking forward to a very high-intensity, action-packed race here tonight. What do you got for us, Sophie?
Yep, WATKINS GLEN is one of the classic American road courses. It was home of the original U.S. Grand Prix. Legends like Jackie Stewart have called this place home and won here. You have amazing American homebred series like Can-Am has raced here. INDYCAR has come here. NASCAR obviously comes here on the abridged layout. And obviously you have the 6 hours here. There's a lot of racing that happens with this track, and is why we have an amazingly high participation count. This race had 3 splits.
Yeah, over 50 drivers registered for our slot here tonight. We've got the top 18 of them. Andy Kirkwood for Votive Racing, reigning Indy NXT Oval Series champ. We'll ride on board with him as he gets up to speed here at WATKINS GLEN. The classic boot configuration omits that iconic bus stop chicane, as we'll see Indy work the backstretch here, hang all the way to the left, and get ready to roll full steam into that carousel corner.
Yes, and obviously that chicane has been reworked, but they don't even need to think about it, Jacob. They can just keep pouring on straight down that long back straightaway. A lot of people say WATKINS GLEN in many ways, especially when you have that shorter NASCAR layout, is like Talladega with right turns. And for the first half of this track, it very much is. Once you get out of turn 1, I don't think your foot ever comes off the throttle till you hit that carousel.
No, it certainly does not, barring some sort of incident, a slide, or other mishap for certain. Once you get to kind of the heel-toe boot portion of the track, where it really starts to slow up, particularly this corner here, as you transition back into that inner loop, if you will, working your way back towards the closing portions. This lap will catch a lot of drivers that may slide very much on the front of the car and turn themselves around in a hurry.
Yeah, there's so many awkward off-camber corners in that boot section when you go down through the laces, then you have the toe. It's so easy to make a mistake through those sections. It's such a deceptively tricky track. And getting an off-track here in turn 1, as we see Andy Kirkwood fire off into turn 1, it's also so easy. You want to carry so much speed up the hill, and it's a challenging track. It looks easy on your screen, but I promise you, it's a very challenging circuit here at WATKINS GLEN.
Yeah, and viewers of the track guide here will note that we were able to get basically all the way out to the outer edge of that colored curb in turn 1 and maximize the exit speed. You basically want to minimize the amount of time you spend transitioning over that colored curb, as it is one of the tallest ones here on the course, and one that, particularly in other cars on the road to Indy, has had a tendency to beach them and slow you down. Not quite so much the case here in the IL-15s taking place here on the track tonight. I want to thank everybody for tuning in to our coverage here of the Indy NXT Road Series. We've got cameras tonight provided to you by Whiplash Sim Cams. Thankful to have them supporting our channel and what we do here. Indy's working through the heel of that boot here, working his way back towards the NASCAR portion of the track. We'll be looking for qualifying times in the mid-130s on the fast end. I believe the time we set in that track guide we mentioned earlier was a 1:30.7. So certainly going to be quite the trip around here, about a minute and a half and change over the course of the event here tonight, as drivers will have to fight the track, but they'll have to likely fight each other with just how much straightaway there is to navigate here.
Right, and unlike the track that we just came from in Indy Open at Autodromo de Hermanos Rodriguez, you don't have high altitude here. You get that draft in full force, so you're going to see a lot of moves into that carousel, Jacob.
Yeah, that carousel, it won't be uncommon to see cars 3, 4, maybe even 5 wide if they opt to really stretch the width of the track out here, as we see Jarrett Corey hot provisionally on the pole with a 1:30.5 right in that mid-range like we were suspecting. Ty Keela just 2/10 down to that as we've ridden on board with Andy Kirkwood. He currently sits 5th on the board. We'll see if he can improve that time on lap 2 here. Number of cars still needing to take time, and they're taking to the course on their flyers or opening laps as it stands. It looks like a number of drivers may have encountered some difficulties in the first lap, as I'm seeing a number of cars working lap 2 with no time set. So likely just a little too far, and especially that turn one that we noted being very, very tricky to keep the car within the boundaries of this layout. We don't get the luxury that the NASCAR config does of being able to track all the way out to that retaining wall from the exit of turn one.
Yeah, and I just want to give a quick shout out to both Tequila and Indy Kirkenbauer. They have run both broadcast splits tonight, doing a marathon effort of Indy US open wheel action.
Yeah, it's certainly no easy feat to make it through one of these races, let alone both of them in the same night. We want to very much put a spotlight on drivers doing the double, if you will. Even if these races aren't the longest things in the world, it's still very much a physical car here, particularly, well, actually, let's just say in general, both cars very, very physical to get around, especially at a track like Mexico City, working through those S corners. We see Jarrett Corey improve on that time down to a 1:30.313. Likes of Frank Wynn, Frisky Frankie, he gets on the board in fourth. Kirkenbauer still sits in fifth. We'll see how the rest of the grid lines up before qualifying ends here in a couple minutes' time. Any other pre-race thoughts here, Sophie, as we kind of close out qualifying here?
I mean, again, one of the core things I think is going to be the case is that draft. I'm curious to see if any of the drivers starting in third and fourth, say Tequila or Frank Wynn, if they can, get a little frisky themselves and possibly leapfrog the two front row starters in Lincoln Everett and Jarrett Corey, who is currently sitting on pole. Be curious to see if that happens in the opening lap. But for the most part, yeah, I think it's a fairly straightforward race in terms of this track. It's a long straightaways, got to watch the draft, but then you have that technical section. So as long as you can stay in that draft envelope, you can't really count anyone out.
Yeah, it was certainly one that I remember taking to heart very well. I believe one of my few Indy Pro 2000 strength of field wins took place here at the Watkins Glen course. Not quite sure if we were running Classic or the bus stop there, but it came down to myself and Alexander Wesley Hazelworth, the law firm, as many know him. And we've got Anna Klemick, your teammate, chiming in chat, fresh off the win at Mexico City, calling Jarrett the GOAT. And I think many of us in and around the community would be much like willing to do the same with Mr. Corey. He sits on the pole as it stands. We'll see if he can convert that into another win here in the Indy NXT Road Series. One of only two winners so far this season. We'll see if anybody can add their name to that list here tonight.
For sure. And Anna Klemick, she's not the GOAT, she's the deer cheering on the GOAT. I see myself out.
We've got ourselves a animal farm, a Noah's Ark, everything in between. Everybody's the goat. Everybody's the deer. We're all here having ourselves a grand old time in the American open wheel circus. Just under a minute left in qualifying. Couple cars still out there taking times. We're going to get to the conclusion now as everybody's gotten through their qualifying runs, and we'll get to a starting grid very shortly.
For sure, Jacob. One thing that I would definitely be nervous if I'm one of those drivers, particularly if I'm starting in mid-pack, say seventh place like an Edison Tool there, or even a David Tuda, is just being scared of a track blocker in that first lap, a big accident in the S's.
Yeah, that S corner kind of notorious for big incidents, but we've got ourselves the starting grid, and we'll start rolling through that right now. Jarrett Corey on the pole with a 1:30.313. He'll be lined up alongside of Lincoln Everett in the second spot. Rogue Racing's Ty Keeler will line up third alongside Frank Wynn. Frisky Frankie, he'll line up fourth ahead of Indy Kirkenbauer in the fifth spot. Chris Fletcher will line up sixth. Good to see Chris out here once more in Indy NXT competition. He's been making appearances throughout the course of these series' lifetimes. Edson Toole will line up seventh next to Thiago Perez in eighth. David Mann will line up ninth with David Tuta rounding out the top 10. Alex Krapser will line up 11th alongside Chris Wetz in 12th. Max Allen will line up 13th alongside J.W. Miller from the TNT community. Good to see him making another appearance here in Indy NXT competition. He'll line up 14th. Zachary Allen will line up 15th alongside Kelly Shannon in the 16th spot. Ellis Spice and Kieran Lifflander. I've raced Kieran in the road to Indy, I believe, in the Indy Pro at Hockenheim, but he's most notably the team captain for Kieran Lifflander Racing on the rallycross side of things on the sim. He'll line up 18th here tonight. Good to see drivers from all over the sim making appearances here in Indy NXT. Like Mr. Liftlander, I actually got to sit alongside him in the NASA Rallycross event from the Sim Gaming Expo, and when they say he is a Rallycross expert, he is a Rallycross expert. He put an absolute smackdown on that field from Sonoma for that event. And we've got ourselves 18 IL-15s ready to take to the track for 14 laps here from Watkins Glen. Important to keep in mind that first lap, there is no push to pass allowed, so that gives drivers 13 laps to distribute 150 seconds of an additional 50 horsepower over the base 450 horsepower in these IL-15s. And I think this is going to be one of those tracks where you're going to want to save it for that last lap.
Yeah, for sure, but you've got plenty to use over the course of the race, over 10 seconds on average per lap that you can use. But also, I think a lot of drivers right now aren't even thinking that far ahead, Jacob. I think they're focusing in on that turn one and that run up these S's for the first time. They're hoping to not follow the instructions that are on the wall there and say they don't want to go bowling.
Yeah, certainly not the kind of actions we want to see on a race course for certain. Of course, Go Bowling was the sponsor for a number of years of the NASCAR race here. I believe they gave out large bowling pin trophies for that event at one point in time. I believe Cheez-It also had sponsored the event here at Watkins Glen. You got a giant Cheez-It trophy for your winning of that event. I believe Kyle Busch picked up one of those, so I remember the victory lane picture of that fairly well. But they're working towards the backstretch here. Of course, many NASCAR finishes, iconic, you know, the Marcus Ambrose, Brad Keselowski, Kyle Busch finish from 2012, I believe. That's one that a lot of people... Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jacob. I was going to say, you also have iconic IndyCar moments, too. Justin Wilson winning with the perennial underdog Dale Coyne here. I believe it was 2009.
Yeah, that does sound about right. Nonetheless, very much an iconic track with many iconic moments with fenders and without. But, of course, we're taking to the track in the premier feeder series of North America's open wheel ladder of IndyCar here with Indy NXT here tonight. And we're going to see what these 18 drivers are able to pack in these cars here tonight.
For sure. We see them wiggling, trying to scrub them tires, try to get them up to temp. The Indy NXT, the Indy NXT IL-15 chassis, very difficult on cold tires. So they're going to want to warm up them Firestones, make sure they are ready for that run into turn one.
Yeah, certainly something we'll see likely on full display tomorrow night as the Oval Series takes on the now legacy scan of Iowa Speedway, the one from 2011, before the repave, if you will. That'll be tomorrow night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, followed, or preceded, rather, by the 7:15 p.m. Eastern Time coverage of the IndyCar Oval Series from Iowa. They're on the current modern scan with those asphalt patches in the corners. We're focusing on the twisty bits here tonight as these drivers work their way back onto the inner loop here, and they'll work through those final two corners and get unleashed onto one of the most iconic tracks in North American auto racing. Field will get put in control of Jarrett Corey. The pace car will pull off now. When does Jarrett go to launch? Looks like here.
Green.
Barney's waving the flag. Jarrett's ready to go. We'll see if he can build any sort of gap before they head up those S turns. Ty Keeler's going to follow him.
Three wide already into turn number one. Oh, we got contact. Frisky Frankie almost spinning.
Yeah, he holds onto it. Not sure if he takes any damage from that. He's going to get swallowed up by the field here. We'll watch as they work through the S corners here. Looks like we remain relatively clean. Cars are going to get back single file here for the most part. We'll hop back up to the front of the field with Ty Keela as he's looking to chase down Jarrett Corey as Lincoln Everett's hot in tow. That basically turned it into a three-car breakaway here at the front.
Yeah, for sure. That definitely caused a lot of people to check up. Good job by this field avoiding the sliding car of Frisky Frankie. Definitely a hairy moment in turn number one.
Yeah, we'll stay with the front of the field here as they navigate through this portion of Watkins Glen, that boot section that very much has a lot of corners that you kind of have to think twice about as you navigate through them lap after lap. You know, there's a bit of slide, particularly through the toe. that'll kind of catch drivers out as they slide further and further around, potentially grabbing the front of the car as we see them re-enter the inner loop here to close out the first lap through these final couple corners. And we'll see what these rest of these drivers can do, as it looks like Jarrett Corey is going to get out to about a 6/10 of a second lead over Ty Keela.
Yeah, that's very much been the story of the season. Jarrett Corey just pulling away from the field. Did that last week in the wet at Catalunya, and he's doing it here now, here in the dry at Watkins Glen.
Yeah, we've got it to gaps up on the screen to try to catch the battles that they are brewing. It looks like this is going to stay relatively tame at the front, so we're going to hop back to David Tuta, who's chasing down Edson Toole. Looks like Tuta's spotting that iconic Gamebridge scheme that Jarrett had been running for a time prior to his joining of Luke Mansky Racing. So that scheme making another appearance, a bit deeper in the field, but nonetheless, good to see that one making some circulation still. He sits about 4/10 off of Edson Toole for 5th. Toole going to get on the push to pass, heading off the carousel there. Frank Wynn's looking to make some ground.
Yeah, I was about to notice Frankie has fallen all the way back to 13th, but he has already gotten around Indy Kirkenbauer, or sorry, not Indy Kirkenbauer, Alex Cresper. Sorry, I got confused by the red cars.
Yeah, Indy's fallen a ways down the order. He runs down in 15th. We've got him on the screen now. He started in, I believe, in the 5th spot. So he likewise probably fell subject to that opening lap contact, falling through the order here. He's going to be looking to try to make up some ground over the course of the rest of this race.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be interesting. A storyline of this race, watching Frank to win, watching Indy Kirkenbauer as they try to side their way through this field using the draft.
Let's actually hop up to Frankie as he works down the front straightaway here. We'll ride on board with him to get an idea of just what drivers are trying to do around this rather speedy course here, as you've got Kieran Lifflander just ahead of Frisky Frankie here. Ty Keela, I believe, set the purple lap that last time by with a 1:30.228, just 6 thousandths faster than the leader of Jarrett Corey. So that lead may start to dwindle if Ty can stay within the draft window as Frankie makes the pass on Lifflander up the S's.
Yeah, if there was a track, not that I would like to have a first corner incident, as we saw earlier tonight, but if there was one, Watkins Glen is a pretty safe one to have it. I had a famously bad qualifying during an Aero Broadcasting Network Champ Car race and climbed from 26th to 6th just because of the draft here. It's that powerful.
It's just as easy to pick up, but it's also just as easy to lose, right? As soon as you get out of that draft window, the cars that remain in it very much start to pull away from you faster and faster. And it looks like Ty Keela's made that draft work as he sits now just inside half a second, depending on where you catch him here on the race course.
Yeah, Ty is currently spotting that Lucky Charms livery just about a half second back of the Luke Mansky Esports machine of Jarrett Corey. Is it possible we have someone knocking off Jarrett Corey as the reigning perennial winner here on the roadside of the Indy NXT?
Yeah, of course, the last time we saw a different winner would have been week 1 at Road America. Of course, that came down to Jarrett Corey and Andre Castro. Castro getting the better by, I believe, around a 10th of a second. So very much been a dominant season so far for Jarrett. Has yet to finish off the podium. 3 wins rather, and a second place finish to his name here on the channel. He'll be looking to add another one to the docket here from Watkins Glen tonight, as you see him leading Ty Keela down the back straightaway here from Watkins Glen.
Yes, and a brief update on the Frisky Frankie comeback drive. Just made a move for P9, currently lapping a second a lap faster than those around Frisky Frankie. So definitely on the charge.
Yeah, big thing I'm noticing with that, though, is Frankie's used more push to pass than anybody here so far tonight. We'll throw that number up on screen. He sits on 109 seconds. Keep in mind, there's 150 seconds available for these drivers to use. The only one who's used potentially close to as much as Alex Krapser running in the 11th spot. And then the likes of Zachary Allen running in 15th are sitting around, 112, 116. So Frankie's been using that button to his advantage here. We'll see if that catches him out later in the going, if he runs out before these other drivers do.
Yeah, it looks like Jarrett Corey is starting to pull out a little bit on Ty Keela. The gap is sitting about 0.6 just over half a second. The lap times are about even, just a tenth between them. So it should be an interesting fight. Jarrett Corey cannot take a break, cannot make a mistake, because the Lucky Charms machine will be right there.
Yeah, this is certainly a track that you can very much control very, very well. You'll see Tequila get on the button for the good portion of this back straightaway. You're trying to reel Jarrett back on in. But if you can control the pace through the corners, you can kind of mitigate a lot of that draft potential down the straights. I think this car benefits it from a bit more than others in terms of being able to kind of break that draft envelope just ever so slightly to keep yourself ahead, as Jarrett seems to have figured out very well here tonight.
Yeah, and they have left Lincoln Everett, the P2 qualifier, behind. That gap is just, he's at risk of falling out of the draft envelope of Tequila.
Yeah, and that's certainly going to be the big factor here, is he'll likely wind up under attack from cars behind if they're able to close in on him. Obviously, the gap back to Chris Fletcher from Lincoln is about 1.5 seconds, so that's not quite at risk just yet. But all it takes is a little mistake here, a little mistake there, and you can be just as well in the clutches of those cars behind, especially when you stop getting that help of the draft ahead.
Once again, looking back at that charge of Frisky Frankie, currently in 8th position, on the back of the 11 machine of Max Allen. Again, he is using a lot of push to pass Frisky Frankie, but he is making his way back towards the pointy end of this field.
Yeah, Frankie won the opening split here from the Indy NXT Road Series from Watkins Glen, the one right over at the week changeover, if you're familiar with the iRacing terminology. Frankie's going to make the move to 7th on Max Allen up the S's here, and he'll work down the back straightaway looking to hunt down Edson Toole about 1.5 seconds up the road. That's going to be quite the gap to have to close, especially with cars hunting him down from behind.
Also, an update on what has happened to Indy Kirkenbauer. They have not been charging through the field, and it looks like they have a damaged front wing. So they had some contact in that turn 1 incident, and that has damaged them.
Yeah, tough break for Indy here. Very much not the night he wanted to have here on the road course here at Watkins Glen. My girlfriend Sammy chiming in the chat saying that her favorite track ambiance is here. Go bowling, go bowling, go bowling, go bowling. I think they're trying to tell us that we need to go bowling, which we have not done. We had meant to go bowling as one of our first dates, and we have still not gone bowling.
Well, it is, I will confirm, it is a nice couples activity. Me and my wife do enjoy it. There's something cathartic about throwing a heavy object into some other objects.
I think that would also play into the popularity of rage rooms, where you just go in and bring a sledgehammer and start breaking a bunch of like old TVs and stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Frisky Frankie now up to 7th as he runs a little bit wide in turn 1. He's going to have a little bit of a wait to catch up. He is 0.5 seconds behind Edison Toole, but then it's another 1.2 to David Tuta, which would put Frisky Frankie in the top 5.
Yeah, I think that gap was about 1.5 seconds just a lap ago, so Frankie's definitely picking him up and putting him down. That last time by, he was about 0.75 seconds faster than the 2 cars ahead of him. He's actually the fastest car on track right now by at least 0.1 second over our leader, Jarrett Corey. So I don't think we can count Frankie out before this race ends as we work around the halfway mark.
Yeah, and unfortunately for Tequila, looks like Jarrett Corey has found another gear and is pulled out around 0.8 seconds of a gap. So that gap between first and second is unfortunately growing.
And it's not something we've really talked about any, but it could be a situation of just tire management, right? We've talked a good bit about how it's very difficult on cold tires. It's very difficult to navigate this car on worn tires. You know, we see it especially on the oval side of things as the runs wear on, that this car gets very, very difficult to handle once you start losing that rear grip. You know, the rear tire is basically the main thing holding this car into the track.
Yeah, for sure. And right now, I mean, there is a fight for the edge of the top 5 here. You have David Tuta, Edison Toole, and Frank Wynn all within 1 second. You can throw a blanket on these 3 cars with how close they are. And David Tuta has been squirming coming out of some of these slow speed corners. So they are definitely trying to get the most out of those Firestones.
Yeah, Tool's going to make the pass on the outside heading down the back straightaway here. Tuta's going to tuck back in line. We'll see if Frankie's able to cruise up towards these guys as they kind of duke it out for the 5th spot here. He's looking to try to maybe make some forward gains, work his way back into this.
For sure, I would not count it out, as it looks like he's going for a lunge into the toe of the boot. Brave move there, but it looks like Edison Tool is going to hang around the outside and has the momentum as they head down into the heel.
Yeah, that outside lane holds so much speed that you can't really... You have to make that pass very early and be able to carry the exit speed, which is just so difficult to do in a car like this with how difficult it is to get the power down, as we're going to watch these drivers navigate towards that penultimate corner here, and they'll work towards the final one to make it down that long front straightaway, work their way into turn 1.
For sure, and it looks like for a brief moment, cars of Max Allen and Chris Wetz were starting to get pulled in, but it looks like they've kind of... It's like an accordion through that boot section. It seems the gaps seem to tighten and then they expand. So I'll be curious to see if Franklin is having to fend off challenges from the likes of Max Allen and Chris Wetz while they're also looking to make their own moves as they go on the inside of David Tuta up through the S's.
Yeah, Frankie looking to the inside. Tuta's going to hold tough on the outside. Frankie's going to get just ahead before they get to this back straightaway here, but that's going to give Tuta the draft, perhaps the strongest of it. He's going to look to the inside in the carousel here. We might see them go too wide.
Yeah, for sure, but it looks like no, because Wynn had the draft from Edison Tool. As Wynn runs a little wide there as they head down, it looks like Tuta's going to try to shove at the inside through laces, but no dice there.
And I'll put Frankie up to the 6th spot. He'll be looking to work on Edson Tool, and now while all this has been happening, they've slowly started working their way towards Chris Fletcher. That gap's a little over a second as they navigate through this boot section of the track. We'll see if that continues to drop as the race progresses. Fletcher obviously losing a substantial bit of ground towards the car ahead of him, as is Lincoln Everett to Ty Kilo. Those gaps both sitting at around 3.5 seconds between each car.
Yeah, and a shout out to Ty Kilo. He is holding it fairly steady with Jarrett Corey. The lap times between them has only been differing for about a tenth, so this is the most exciting battle on track when regards to position between 5th, 6th, and 7th. But Ty Kilo has been holding it very steady on the gearbox of Jarrett Corey as well.
Yeah, that gap just within a second. It's been basically holding steady the last 3 or 4 laps at around that 1 second mark. We'll see if that has any potential to drop. You know, all it takes is one mistake from either driver to kind of put them in a spot to roll forward.
And Frank DeWin is making the move on Edison Tool as they pull down this long back straightaway. Frankie looks to have the move done as they head into the carousel.
Yeah, he'll have him cleared.
Yes, and he's going to start setting his sights on that orange machine of Chris Fletcher.
Just up ahead there, you can see Chris Fletcher in that all-orange car. Frankie's going to be looking to try to reel him in. That gap's still just barely over a second, but I'd imagine with as hard as Frankie's been pushing here, he's going to try to bite into that as quickly as he can.
New purple lap from Ty Kila, 1:30.277. Definitely trying to catch up to the GOAT here, Jarrett Corey. We'll see. Catching someone is one thing, passing is another, as I learned earlier tonight.
Now Frankie's quickly reeled in Chris Fletcher here. He'll be looking to try to make quick work of Chris, likely up through the backstretch and the S-turns here as they'll navigate through turn 1. Big draft on the back straightaway for Frankie. Chris has absolutely no help here. Frankie will look to the outside. We'll see if Chris can do anything to hold steady on the inside here, heading off into the carousel.
Yeah, looks like Frankie has the edge, but he's not quite clear. Let's see if he can carry that speed, carry that momentum. He'll have the inside into laces, but he clears before then. Can Chris Fletcher throw it back, do this crossover? Looks to be no. And Frank DeWin has climbed back to where he started after that first lap, first corner calamity.
Yeah, you almost
What
have
a drive.
Yeah, you have to think of the race that could have been had he had stayed up here the whole time. Likely could have had a grand battle with the likes of Jarrett and Ty at the front of the field, but he'll likely have to settle for fourth here tonight. Frankie putting on a show, working his way back through the field following that earlier incident.
Yeah, having to wonder what your race was like if you didn't have a first corner incident. Definitely not something I know anything about tonight. But we'll seeing this great run from this Canadian here, Frank DeWin. Let's see if he can catch up to Lincoln Everett. But Lincoln Everett is 4.5 seconds up the road, and of course, DeWin is going to have to start worrying about the cars behind as they get into the draft, because he has not quite pulled out enough of the draft envelope on Chris Fletcher. That gap is only 0.6 of a second. So we'll see if Chris can mount a charge maybe to retake the 4th spot.
We've got a number of Ty Keela fans chiming in chat, the like of Vote of Racing's Shane Coker and Rogue Racing's Kyle Clenworth, as they're rooting on Ty as he looks to try to close that gap on Jarrett Corey. But Corey's built that gap up slowly but steadily over the course of this race. You know, a couple of laps ago it was just inside of 1 second. Now it's sitting closer to 1.3, 1.4. So he's definitely found something to keep his IL-15 pointed as fast as possible at the front of this field.
Yeah, we normally talk about dirty air on the oval side, but you do have to wonder if it was possibly harder on Ty Keela's tires, because he was so close behind the IL-15 of Jarrett Corey. It was taking some of that air off that front nose, having to work the tires a little harder. Possible that they are falling off as we are approaching lap 13, 2 laps remaining in this event here at Watkins Glen.
Yeah, let's just kind of run through the rest of the field here. So we've got Jarrett Corey leading. You see him working into turn number 1 here. Ty Keela will follow him up. He's the closest to the front here at about 1.5 seconds back of Jarrett. Lincoln Everett, he runs in third in the number 4 machine. And then you got Frank Wynn having to work from deep in the field. He's up to 4th. Chris Fletcher in tow behind him. Edson Toole in 6th. Got David Tuta working in 7th. Kieran Liflander, after starting 18th, is up to 8th. He's working on the gearbox of David Tuta now. He'll look to the outside, down the back straightaway here. He'll likely make the move for 7th there. Chris Wetz runs along in 9th. Max Allen rounds out the top 10. David Mann, you can see off in the distance here, is in 11th. J.W. Miller runs in 12th. You got Ellis Spice in 13th. Thiago Perez in 14th. Zachary Allen runs in 15th. Alex Krapser, he runs in 16th, likely due to issues early on in this event. Kelly Shannon runs in 17th, and then you got Indy Kirkebauer rounding out the field through having to make a stop to repair the front end of his IL-15. He still circulates further down the road. We're back to the front of the field here as we'll catch Jarrett as he approaches the white flag. Want to thank everybody for tuning in so far here tonight to a relatively action-packed race here from Watkins Glen, as we'll watch Jarrett take the white flag from Barney for one final lap here from one of the most iconic tracks here on the North American side of the pond.
For sure, and if you are enjoying the action you are seeing here on P1 Broadcasting, make sure that you click that like button and hit the subscribe button and ring that bell to get notified of all of our broadcasts. We're going to be coming back tomorrow for more open wheel action. Want to tell the viewers real quick about it at home?
Yeah, so tomorrow night we'll be covering the IndyCar Oval Series Top Split, 7:15 Eastern Time from the Iowa Speedway. We'll follow that up with the Indy NXT Oval Series at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time and round out the night with Mark Murphy calling the action for the Area 51 IndyCar Series, their second round from Phoenix at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And that'll be the coverage there. Wednesday night, we'll have the Formula Indy Series from right here at Watkins Glen, 8:20 p.m. Eastern Time with Gary Gotso on the call for that. And to get the rest of our plugs in, we've got a GoFundMe link in the description. We do these official series broadcasts on behalf of the community at absolutely no charge. If you'd like to support us monetarily, feel free to do so or throw us a super chat here on YouTube in the closing stages. But Jarrett Corey is going to round off the outer loop, the boot, head towards that inner loop, and he'll round those final couple corners. The gap now over 3 seconds. Ty Keela likely struggling in the closing stages here to keep that car underneath him But Jarrett
For
Corey
sure.
winning here once more.
For sure, and Jarrett Corey seemed to turn on the afterburner on those last couple of laps. When they came to take the white, they set the fastest lap of the race of a 1:30.1. Another dominant win from Jarrett Corey. But shout out to Ty Keela for keeping him honest.
Yeah, it looked like Ty was going to try to do a little of a rev burnout alongside Jarrett, but opted to keep rolling down the track. See all the drivers working their way past Jarrett as he sits just off the exit of turn number 1 here. Hopefully nobody hits him. Not sure if he's quite far enough away from the racing surface to avoid being struck by at-speed cars trying to finish up their races, but it looks like everybody's going to play along here tonight. And we will get the finishing results here, and I'm sure Jarrett's just waiting to start ripping his burnouts, but we'll get the finishing results up on the screen and run you through them.
Yeah, and while you're doing that, it's a shame he couldn't quite get on the podium, but a big shout out to Frank DeWin. Having that slide, that near half spin at the start of the race into turn number 1, dropped all the way to the tail of the field, made it all the way back to where he started in P4. I'm sure he's frustrated with that, but excellent run from Frisky Frankie.
Yeah, Frankie certainly put on a show, but ultimately the Jarrett Corey show continues as he'll win here tonight from the pole. Ty Keela, after starting the 3rd, will finish 2nd. Lincoln Everett, he'll finish 3rd, and I believe his first appearance here on the P1 channel. Frank Wynn, with his charge from deep in the field following that opening lap slide, will finish 4th. Chris Fletcher, Edson Toole, Kieran Lifflander, after starting 18th, worked his way up to 7th, maybe had a little bit more. Had a couple laps spin left on the table. David Tuta, 9th. Max Allen will round out the top 10. David Mann will line up in 11th. J.W. Miller in 12th. Thiago Perez in 13th. Ellis Spice 14th. Zachary Allen 15th. Alex Krapser 16th. Kelly Shannon in 17th. And Indy Kirkenbauer will round out the field here from Watkins Glen. And we will see who we get up here in the interview room. See who's got something to tell us. We have Ty and Jarrett. Go ahead, Sophie.
Yeah, quick shout out to Ty for informing Lincoln that there is a broadcast and interview available. So hopefully we get Lincoln as well.
That will certainly be nice to see. We'll actually see if we could we'll give everybody a minute as we track down the podium finishers here from Watkins Glen. We'll try to get cars up on the screen, so whoever we manage to catch, we manage to catch. We will see if we can find ourselves some automobiles from the track. Lincoln on the screen. If he manages to make it on in here. I'll throw the link to the Discord in case somebody needs it in the chat here. Meantime, I think what we'll do is we'll do the same thing we did last time out and work through the top down. I think that's a bit of fun in its own right, since we can get the winner up through here as fast as possible. We'll get Jarrett on up here. Jarrett, Jake Collins, Sophie Connell, P1 Broadcasting. You got us?
Yep.
Well, I think this race went about as good as it possibly could have. You started on the pole. I'm not sure if you necessarily even saw another car get anywhere close to you here tonight, as ultimately the margin of victory just over 3 seconds. Kind of talk us through your race here from Watkins Glen. Obviously a track very much known for its high-speed, draft-intense action, but you managed to kind of break away from the field handedly here in the opening stages to kind of maintain and build up that gap over the course of the running.
Yeah, it certainly seemed like the draft wasn't quite as strong. I mean, I was just talking to Ty, and we were using push to pass sort of by his description about like the same parts of the track. So like he's maybe gaining like 2/10. But yeah, and he was keeping me honest though. I mean, he was keeping up in that 50 bit. So I mean, I got to hand it to him for sticking with me for as long as he did. But yeah, it's definitely a track that's very drafty, and you've got to manage to push the pass in some ways, not really in the same way as Road America maybe, where at Road America you've got like 3 giant straights to just use push to pass. Here it's really just one straight, but I feel like this straight is probably more important, like in terms of using the push to pass than any of the ones on at Road America because of that uphill. Sort of my findings, like just racing all kinds of cars here, is that like any difference in straight line speed, whether it's like in a multi-car series, like one car being faster on a straight just naturally, or an open setup running less wing, or just having draft, and in this case, the push to pass, like it'll make a big difference. I didn't necessarily test it. I just sort of figured that I would be wanting to use the push to pass going up the hill, and so my strategy was to just use it up the hill until right at the end when I had like plenty like a push pass left, and I just spammed it the last couple laps and built up the gap. But at that point, I think I had tied just barely. Like if we go at like 1.5 seconds, which is what we said, like I think after Miami and what seemed to be the case of how Henry was gaining time to me there. Like he was right at the edge of that, where he was maybe getting a 10th, like sort of advantage down the straight, 2/10 maybe still. But it was much smaller, and like he might not have had as much left at the end, and so I was able to just pull away, and make it maybe look like more of a dominant race than it was. But he was definitely keeping me honest early on.
Yeah, and kind of the big thing that it looked like maybe got handled a bit differently was the push to pass, especially from the front of the field. You know, we saw guys kind of using it a bit more offensively than defensively. Than we have seen in a number of cases previously. You know, you tend to see guys come in the button around the same time, but we saw a number of guys maybe waiting longer down the straights, taking advantage of when drivers would be getting off the button and getting on it later. Obviously, you might not have seen quite as much of it at the front, but I'm imagining that the general push to pass strategy wound up feeling just a little bit different given the nature of the course here tonight.
Yeah, in some ways it was, because sort of exiting turn 1, there was a couple laps where I decided to just wait to activate the button compared to other tracks where like on the corner exit, every time I'd hit it as soon as possible, just because it's sort of more important when you're just starting to get accelerated. But I just figured that it'd be worth saving maybe a few seconds in case it's important at the end to just wait and have the hill, because that's really sort of what I was banking on, like being the important place to put the push to pass. But I can definitely see how a driver might sort of see it as an opportunity also to wait until after the hill, especially if you've got the draft, because then you can probably stick a bit closer and then use it, and that might save you a bit of push to pass. So yeah, it's definitely interesting here and a bit different than other tracks.
Sophie, you got anything to add for Jarrett here tonight?
Yeah, I was gonna say, Jared, for a good chunk of that race, you had Ty Keela just under a second behind you, but then it really seemed like you pulled away from the road racing driver for ended up being about 3 seconds, and you set the fastest lap of the race that on the penultimate lap of 1:30.1. Were you doing any tire saving, doing anything to kind of look after those Firestones?
Not really. This track seemed to be one of those where you can just huck the car around and just sort of rely on the downforce. In the race before this one, I had more front tire wear. This one, I had more rear tire wear, which is interesting. It felt like maybe I was sliding around the rears a bit more this race, but there isn't a whole lot of tire wear. They're definitely like the strongest in those first 2 laps, maybe 3 if you include the opening lap of the race. But after that, they sort of like drop off a little bit and then just kind of plateau, and then the fuel starts to burn off. So then you start to get a little bit of pace back, and then at the end, I was push to pass spamming, so there's a bit more lap time there. I mean, if you push to pass spam at the beginning, I would go probably even faster because I'd have more grip. But there isn't a whole big, there isn't a lot of tire wear here.
Certainly, tire wear or not, you certainly wore down the competition here over the course of the running here tonight. You know the drill, Jarrett. Friends, family, sponsors, anybody you want to shout out, floor is yours.
Yeah, Luke Mansky Esports again. Second win in a row with my new team, so that's great. P1 Broadcasting for putting this on. It definitely seems like this is becoming the soft race of the series, especially in this second season. I haven't really been seeing as many big time slots like pop up over the week, at least as far as points are concerned. Just um, like I'll have the top points of the week after like the third time slot of the week, which is this one. So this is like the soft for the series, so it's great, and it's great to have that broadcasted.
Well, thanks for coming out each and every week here, Jarrett. We hope to catch you next week from, I believe we're hitting Circuit Zandvoort, one I know that you're very, very strong at, and we hope to see you kind of continue your reign of dominance here in the Indy NXT Road Series.
Yep, I'm excited for that track. I'll see you there.
That'll do it for our winner in Jarrett Curry once more here in Indy NXT Road Series competition. We'll get down to Ty Keela, who I think this is one of his. Actually, he's been on the podium for this series before. I'm not sure which one. One of the next series, but he'll get on in here. Ty, Sophie Connell, Jacob Collins, P1 Broadcasting. You got me?
I got you.
Well, Ty, after quite a string of unfortunate events, and I believe the Oval Series in this car, you get yourself up on the podium here, I believe, for the second or third time here on the Road Series. Kind of walk us through trying to hunt down Jarrett over the course of this race and what you maybe figured out here this week.
Well, Watkins has always kind of been something I've been a little bit better at compared to most tracks. If you watched the other broadcast for the IndyCar, I was absolutely horrendously bad. So Watkins treats me well typically. For whatever reason, just fits my driving style a little bit better. And in the beginning of the race, I just wanted to make sure I got out there in P2 if possible to stay right behind Jarrett. I knew having the inside line there is a bit of an advantage. So really, it was just try to save that push to pass as long as possible, stay within that draft window. And fortunately, I was able to save a little bit of push to pass, I think. But towards those last two laps, I don't know if I just had a little bit more tire temperature in there or what. But Jarrett, he didn't make a single mistake that I saw. So that was just an impressive drive on his part. Did everything I could and gave it my best, but it just wasn't enough to be faster than him. But man, it was fun keeping up with such a great racer. That's what I'll say about that. I was really proud of myself there. So
Yeah, certainly always feels good when you're going up against the cream of the crop like we have with Jarrett Curry here in Indy NXT Road Series competition. Kind of walk us through what it's like having to manage, staying in the draft around a place like this where so much of it is dependent on staying as close as you possibly can and trying to reduce or minimize any potential mistakes through the few twisty sections of the track that we've got around this high-speed track.
yeah, just try not to scrub speed as much as possible, carrying momentum. I know we talk a lot about prioritizing apex exit speeds, and that's kind of what Watkins allows me to do for whatever reason. I just kind of got the track a little bit dialed in to how to apexes here, so it's just all about hitting the apexes mostly. At the top of the hill there, it's just it's kind of weird, no braking. Most cars I feel like I have to brake a little bit, but there's really no braking involved, so it's just try to get a nice corner entry, hit the apex. I think I learned that I'm maybe cutting that corner a little bit too tight based on how Jarrett was hitting it. And maybe that's where the extra tire temperature was coming from, that and down the hill. So
Certainly good opportunities for learning when you can see cars ahead of you on the track, especially near the front of the field. Sophie, you got anything else for Ty here tonight?
Yeah, on a similar vein to talking about managing the draft envelope, how different is it? Both of us were in the previous broadcast. How different is it dealing with the draft at Mexico City in the IR-18 versus dealing with it here at Watkins Glen in the IL-15?
that's a good question. I wasn't really in the draft much at Mexico City, so but I will say I do feel like this car has a little bit better of a drafting to it. It feels like it has just a little bit more dirty air or something. I'm not sure, but it seems a little bit easier to get a good run. Um, so I don't know. I haven't really done much comparison in that aspect. I think this was one of the first races I was really able to stay close to someone who was nice and quick. So tough question for me to answer. You guys might be able to expand on that more, but I do feel like this car has a slight edge, and maybe that's also with the push to pass, just being, still 50 extra horsepower or whatever it is, but with the only 400 horsepower. I forget the exact numbers, but you know what I'm trying to say. It's just a lot more of a boost there. So That's what helped me stay in the draft window more than anything. Is just using a little bit of push to pass out of the exits and staying in that draft window, which, try to stay within a half a second or less just to be there as close as possible. But once I saw it getting up to a little bit over a second, I was like, uh-oh, this is bad. And then, after like 1.5 seconds, it was gone. So.
Yeah, certainly a number of things we've kind of seen play out a bit differently in this car compared to its bigger IndyCar counterpart. You know the drill here, though, Ty. Podium finish, friends, family, sponsors, anybody you want to shout out, floor is yours.
Shout out to both of you tonight for putting on the show. Always appreciate it. I'm going to go watch this one back after this and again in the morning. Shout out to P1 Broadcasting as a whole. I know we just had a great show there on Votive. Check it out if you didn't check out that Votive race last night at Kentucky. It was an absolute blast. I did bad, but the racing was really, really good. And Kyle got the win there, so that's cool for Rogue Racing. And shout out to Sophie for putting out the track guides. I should have watched the Mexico City one. That's what I learned today. So shout out to you for putting those on, and shout out to you, Jacob, as well for the track guides in this series.
Well, thank you, Ty, for making it out here for another Indy NXT appearance. Are we going to catch you tomorrow night at Iowa, or are you still abstaining from the ovals in this car?
The IR's gotten a little bit higher. We might feel a little risky depending on how Iowa goes in the big car too.
All right. Well, we've got a coin flip for Ty Keela going into the Oval Series round from Iowa tomorrow, but we'll maybe catch you next week from Zandvoort here on the roadside. As always, Ty, glad to have you up here. Good finish here tonight. Thanks.
You guys have a good night, and we'll see you next week.
That'll do it for Ty Keela. We'll get Lincoln Everett's car back up on the screen here. Not sure if he's going to join us here, but he deserves his due for a podium finish here tonight. Not an easy feat, especially up against the competition we saw tonight. Obviously, with the likes of Frank Wynn having to charge his way back through the field, you have to think for certain that this spot could have just as well been his. But Lincoln made a clean go of it and stayed up nice and clean, finishing third here tonight. And that'll do it for the Indy NXT Road Series from Watkins Glen. Sophie, you got any other closing thoughts here? As we saw quite an engaged battle of cars working the way through the field with the likes of Frankie and Kieran Lifflander.
Exactly, Jacob. This race was classic Watkins Glen. Amazing passes, a lot of on-track action and excitement. And we're going to move from a classic American circuit to a classic European circuit. We're going to trade the Adirondacks for the dusty dunes of Zandvoort next week. Can't wait.
That track featuring a very heavily banked final corner. These IL-15s won't be too discomforted by the banking there. Do want to thank everybody once again for tuning in to the Indy NXT Road Series. We will be back next week from Zandvoort, but tomorrow night we'll be covering Oval Series action from Iowa for the Indy NXT Oval Series. And we want to thank those that do all the difficult jobs all around the world that let us bring you coverage of American open wheel racing here on P1 alongside many other great things in this life. We thank you very, very much. Hope everybody had a great time watching the action here on P1, and we will catch you at the next one. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.